Well, good morning everybody. I'm Gary from Lantana Removal, Queensland. It's been an interesting weekend and an interesting week last week as we've been, increasing the amount of information we've put out and the information that we've gathered from government departments, councils, politicians, different avenues that we've headed down. Now, there's a very likely very shortly we'll be heading to Canberra to head this up with the political parties in relation to eradication of Lantana. A lot of the stuff that's coming back through many different channels, are how we're being removed from national parks and from state forests and different areas. Lands are being closed off by the national parks and wildlife operations and things like that. I have a lot of contact now with bush regenerators, and some good, some not so good. But at the end of the day, we have 10 million hectares of this material swallowing up our land, and we are heading to 35 million hectares according to the predictions. And we're heading to that with this bush regeneration programs that have been, put out there by the national parks and wildlife and all the other government agencies that have a foothold in this misinformation they want to give to you. They say, there's maybe this animal, well, they don't actually specifically say the animal. There's a few animals use this material, according to them. There's more detrimental animals using the material in the birds down in New South Wales that are causing diebacks in the forest, but they don't want to talk about that too much. Okay, the simple hard facts are, I need you guys to share this information throughout all the groups and networks that you have within your state, okay, because I can do quite a few locally around my area here and the support is magnificent, but I don't know what groups and different bodies are around your local areas, but please share this information to those people. The more people that get brought up to speed on this, on the facts of it, not the lies and the misinformation that is peddled by these government departments. So much of the information that they have generated in these books, and remember this, these books have been endlessly written, these reports, these things, they cost us a fortune. You and I are absolute fortune to prepare, and the information is absolutely incorrect. It's so far off what actually happens in the real world, in the real environment. This garbage of these animals living in these habitats and these Lantana infestations is absolutely categorically false. The amount of animals that even pass through the medium or light infestations is nothing. And where would they have lived before? Yeah, that's right, they would have lived in the forestry that existed before you corrupted our forestry so badly with 10 million hectares. Since 2000, they have done nothing but write reports, create weeds of national significance register, 32 weeds on that list. Not one of them have they done 1 ounce of good with. The public continually comes along and says, oh man, you want to see the stuff up here on the Sunshine Coast. You want to see the stuff in New South Wales mid-north coast. You want to see the stuff further down. And then you have ex-bush regenerators. These people that are passing themselves off as bush regenerators that are saying negative things about this, my saying that we need to mechanically remove millions of cubic meters of this material per year. We must get to critical mass, to the growth rate of this material. It's simple mathematics. Every single person can understand that if something is growing exponentially at that alarming rate, then eventually you get to 35 million hectares. You've gone from, at one stage, over 5 million hectares to 10 million hectares under their expert procedures that we have paid millions, probably even billions of dollars. It will be billions in the costs because of this negligence. And they tote it off as being, oh no, but we can't eradicate the Lantana. We can't remove large amounts of Lantana because where will those couple of animals that we don't identify but may use this material in some way? What about the billions of animals that have already been removed from those areas? If you work out on an acre of land, okay, some of this land, some of our most productive forestry lands, and you work out how many animals per acre are on that land, and you're talking 10 million hectares, and these people say nothing about those animals that have been removed from those environments, because they want to say, well, there might be something that uses that. This is all a financial game played by parties that have hidden agendas in this. Councils that don't want to spend a cent. Now, we're now off on this tangent of, on the 20th of this month, we will be sitting down with Moreton Bay Regional Council to find out how the heck did they come up with low risk on a plant that's on record as having killed children and adults. How the heck do we get to low risk? The amount of side effects of this material growing in your neighbourhoods, including what it's going to do to land prices as people become aware of exactly what it costs to remove it, because we have to remove it, so sooner or later this is going to be paid for. It's going to happen that we have to halt this material. We have to pull it up and eradicate it and finish this rubbish. We are all being told that there's management processes in place. They're on their third stage of this Weeds of National Significance, ending in 2017. Whoops, it's already over. And that's why the councils, I believe, are going to say, well, that's why we say it's low risk now, is because they gave up on it. Because they never, ever managed to do anything significant with any one of these weeds. And yet they continue to write papers after papers with information that's 30 to 100 year old, that they're rewriting and rewriting and rewriting those documents and those studies that were done. None of the information's even new. And believe me, I'm not saying we spend $1 on rewriting that information or redoing those findings or starting new things. We need to put serious money into eradication. Stand up, straight up eradication, to protect your properties, to protect mine, to protect the environment, to put those millions of animals back into our ecological lands that we own. They're ours. They're not the national parks. You know, the bush regenerators that have had this imaginary Lyme disease. You want to see the pictures of these imaginary bush regenerators. People have lost their marriages. Their husbands have contracted the disease. It's a variant of Lyme disease, but it's not acknowledged in Australia. Tell these people, you have a look at these people in these wheelchairs laying on these beds, you know, some beautiful, beautiful ladies laying in these beds that you look at them and you know they are seriously sick. I mean, it breaks my heart looking at those people. And not one of these bush regenerators that have negative things to say acknowledges their sacrifice. Some of these people have died. These people know people and can give you names of people who have died in this fight. And not once you'll hear of that stuff. It is criminal what the government has done in these things. We don't even have the tests. Yet once upon a time in Australia, we were one of the leading forefronts of most any technology. And yet we don't even make ships or cars or anything here. Our laboratories are a joke. Not because the people working in the laboratories don't have the incredible skills that they once had, because there is no funding to go, you know what, Lyme disease definitely exists here. Whether it's a variant or otherwise, people are dying. This isn't a game. A child is born after being infected in utero. And we're not rallying around this and going, we are sending these people into harm's way, into these tick-infested environments, and they are paying the ultimate price for this. These people are losing their homes and every other part of their lives, their marriages, their children. And nobody gives a damn. Nobody is rallying around that and going, well, you know what, I know for a fact The level of the ticks that follow Lantana is incredible. I've been in it for 30 years. I know for a fact. I have cleared that many places where the ticks go when the Lantana goes. Do I want to spend millions of dollars for somebody to go study how many ticks are in that material? I don't give a rat's. We've wasted too much money on this already, on stupidity. When people pay this price. On that subject, the other people who are bush regenerators now, you want to start looking very hard at how you're covered legally and financially with this, with insurances and workers' comp. All right, because they wipe you like you wouldn't believe. They lay these people off and they're going to fight for every penny they can fight for in an imaginary disease that not so imaginary consequences of these people and what they pay for this price. We have incredible people working in the bush, risking their lives. This isn't a game. They are risking their lives with these hidden dangers, and we aren't supporting them enough. You know, we're not standing up to the government enough and going, well, we better get somebody over there and bring that technology of these proper tests back to Australia so we can test people here in Australia for this imaginary disease that are costing these lives, having children infected in the womb, husbands or wives being infected by these things off clothing. That's factually. These people have never been in the battlefield. Exactly the same as asbestos was to the wives of the workers working. How many wives did we lose? How many mothers, how many grandmothers did we lose through cleaning, doing the simple washing? And they died as a result of that. Governments are not to be trusted in looking after the people. But okay, we're back to Lantana. Now, with the Lantana being what it is, with 10 million hectares, at what point do we draw the line? If I said to you, 10 million hectares is $1 billion for us to deal with, and the figures are, I'm not even pretending to put a figure on that particular thing. Because the growth rate is compounding interest, 1 doesn't go to 2, right? 2 goes to 4, 4 goes to 8, 8 goes to 16, 16 goes to 32. That's how this works. This is in the most precious of our resources. It's pouring out of our national parks and out of our state forests like the criminal negligence that it is. And these people actually control the thought process that explains to you how to deal with this, and it's completely incorrect. They don't even understand that water is the major trafficker of this material, as well as the component that makes it expand the way it does. If this material has access to water, it generates all year round. Have a look around us at the watercourses that are absolutely choked out in our local environments, not just the national forestry and national parks and the state forests. You have a look at it, and it's sitting in these areas. And that's why I say to you, in 2 years' time, this bombshell, this explosion of this material, we haven't seen anything in Lantana yet than what we're going to witness in the next 2 years. We don't have to wait 20 years for this. We only have to wait 2 years. On the current processes that the council has inflicted on our citizens, we don't have to wait. These models are going to be completely changed because of where Lantana is being allowed to live. And these experts have been writing these papers for the last 50 years, and they haven't even identified this crisis. I'm standing in front of you as the only person that can get into the terrains, at the steep terrains, sensitive areas, and remove this material in a reasonable level. Okay? We have to be removing millions of cubic meters of this material to get to a point at which we will meet critical mass, meet the growth rate. Until then, we are on a downhill slide, gathering pace, and nobody cares. Nobody is telling you this truth about this stuff. I have a business in this. I make no bones about this. Business is going to be exponentially equal to the problem. I don't lose. It's no way to lose out of this. But what is happening to our country? I cannot stand by and watch these councils completely give you the wrong information, give you the wrong ideas about this material. If you have lantana show up on your property, you must destroy it. You cannot take a different approach, because it grows that volume like that. They admit, all the way through history, they admit that the longer it stays in place, the more the cost is for not only the removal, the processing of, and then the rehabilitation. And then they want to say, well, you know, we can't imagine how we could pay for the rehabilitation of the lands. They caused this stupidity of these tiny little minuscule game playing things to keep it out of tourists' eyes, to then make it look like it's not really that big a problem, while it lines our street and every one of you get used to seeing it there. Now I know I've got that many people on board consistently sharing this information, sharing these things out there, expanding the groups. It doesn't matter whether it's a four-wheel drive group, whether it's a gardening group, whether it's a mum and dad's group. Every single Australian has a place to play in this, because it's going to cost us all. It's going to cost us billions of dollars, and the sooner we get into the fight, the lower that figure is going to be. But this is no different a national biosecurity disaster than a national works program of roads, of electricity, of water, of sewage. It is a national problem, and we are going to have to get into it. 35 million hectares is all of our farming land involved in this, and not in the tiny little minuscule problems that we see at 10 million hectares. And it's not minuscule, but you can imagine that growth rate at that time frame, in that volume. We are going to have trouble feeding our people. It's just, this is a guarantee. It's not a maybe. We are headed to that point unless we stand up and we put our feet in the ground. We grab the politicians and we say, this needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed at the federal election. It needs to be addressed at the Longman election. It needs to be addressed at every single election. And until they get the point, then we're going to have to keep sacking them and getting new ones, until they realise that this is that critical to our family's prosperity. When our values of our land locally within Sanford, Narangba, you know, the names just change. It's New South Wales. It's every single part of this state, from the Daintree all the way down to the bottom of New South Wales. Can you look at that area? Have a look at the maps that show you in red where the infestations are now, and tell me that New South Wales has any clue about doing anything about this insane levels of these infestations. Or Queensland, in southeast Queensland, look at the infestations. If you're not frightened, you're not paying attention to exactly what it means to us and our children. Because nationally we pay this price. We're just got our head in the sands that the politicians wants us to have in there, but sooner or later we are going to pay this price. And our children are going to pay this price. This is a deadly toxic material, not only to the animals, but to the children, to the families. It's financially an absolute disaster, but they don't want you to hear that. They don't want you to pay attention to it, but they do want you to clean up your backyard. But they don't want to support you with your neighbour cleaning up their backyard. Look, there's going to be properties already at this stage that are virtually worth half of their value, because that's what the cleanup bill's going to be. You need to hear that. You need to understand that. And this stuff spreads on that basis that we're all going to be touched by it in some way or another. Even if you live in an apartment in the city and you have no garden, you're going to pay into this kitty. Because we will have to address this. It's only the timeline that we finally go, you know what, this is serious. That's why four-wheel drive groups, camping groups, caravanning people, Every single person heading through those national parks and those areas touring Australia need to stand up and take pictures and add to our information. Put your local address. I mean, like in New South Wales or northern New South Wales or southeast Queensland or Gympie, or I'm not asking for your personal address. Put those places in there so people can identify when you say you want to see the rat's tail out here. You want to see the oh, come on. Oh, look, there's too many of the weeds that have come up. This isn't just about Lantana. Lantana's my focal point. It's what I do incredibly well, okay? But while you're in there destroying Lantana and removing Lantana and eradicating Lantana, this management garbage needs to be thrown out the window. It gives all of the wrong connotations to this. It has to be eradicated. We have to re-establish the natural ecosystems as best we can, but we cannot allow this material to keep growing in the way it's growing. And the links that this material has to those other materials is interlinked. They're all part of the one problem. This garbage of these muppets turning around and saying, yes, but if we pull the Lantana out, something else worse might take its place. There's a reason why Lantana has been the way it has. It's because mums and dads and many Australians are unaware of it. They're unaware of how deadly, dangerous and important its eradication is, because they've been lied to. It's been misrepresented. You've not been told that people going into this material and fighting this material die because of the Lyme disease or derivatives of, or however you want to put it. They're dead. They're dying. There's suicides from the amount of pain that have been inflicted. These are terrible, terrible diseases that cause immense pain. And yet nobody tells you that story. Some of these people are farmers' wives, and they didn't go into these environments. He came home with, again, these ticks on his clothes. They attacked and infested the wife, and the wife paid the price. This is Australian living, and we don't hear those particular stories of those things. But see, when you remove people from the environments, okay, you take all of these bushwalkers, cycle riders, motorcycle riders, four-wheel drive clubs. Yeah, kick the buggers out of the national parks. They do so much damage to the ecology. Look at, they drive down the roads. There is so much misinformation and lies told for that reason, to take you out of that environment, to stop you seeing how insane the infestations are. But what happens is, when you remove people from those beautiful environments that we should have fought to protect, this should have never gotten to 10 million hectares. Those people won't put money into protecting those assets because they don't value the assets, because they're not allowed to go there. Yet from our childhoods and all the times that we've come through our beautiful nation and our indigenous culture, we have seen how much the land plays a part of our spirituality and our importance, and how much we value the ecology. When you remove people from that and you hide it from them, and you hide the problem from them, you rob them of the ability to care. They're never going to put money on the table to say, this is a national works program. This affects our ability to provide food for our families. It affects our financial security because it robs our land values. These are facts facing so many Australians. The vacant land being left when people have been forced off the land because these weeds have gotten that enormous. They can no longer afford to tend to that land. That's infecting all the other lands around it. It's poured out of the national parks and the state forests onto those lands, and those people lost their properties because of that criminal negligence. It's a toxic, noxious weed that kills people and it kills animals. And goats do not eat this material by choice. You take a goat and you stake the goat to the plant you want it to eat, and you starve it of everything else. And then you feed it molasses, and you feed it another couple of supplements to make it live a little longer. Next time you get an opportunity, you want to grab a piece of lantana and rub your hand backwards along the shank and see what that feels like. And imagine that in your mouth. Don't put it in your mouth, but imagine what that would be like. Having your internals torn apart as you're forced to eat that material. And when these people who put that up there, and I would say there's a certain amount of them are goat salespeople, people who are breeding goats, when they really get nailed to it and forced to admit or to work with that, they turn around and go, there's plenty more goats. Why isn't the RSPCA on that? You know, when you see what it does to cattle, if you go on the DPI site and you see the damage done to cattle and you apply that to goats that are forced to eat it, they're staked to it, there's no other food available to them and they're starved to eat it. These are people who are coming onto these forums or these informations and giving you information like that. I don't know any people, well, to be honest, I don't associate with people like that. Would you? You know, when somebody comes out of the closet and they say, this is how we see the world, that morality, don't come near me. You're not going to like what happens. You're not going to like that. It's disgraceful. Anyway, it's far worse than those things, but let's leave it now there. So we need to rally our people around this and to take this to Canberra. So therefore, I need people to share the bejesus out of it, to bring groups in across the country, to share, to create that network, so when we do go to the political scene and we do ask for funding to eradicate lantana, instead of being put in a position where we're still got arguing backwards and forwards in these things, when we address why councils have shot us in the foot with 20 years ago stopping eradication programs. But there's questions now, which was brought up in talking to Senator Hanson, that there's quite a big possibility that these councils were collecting the funding for this material. There's a lot of corruption goes on, and we need to get to the bottom of this, because the federal and state governments say we've put in a lot of money into this. Yes, a lot of the information's false. Yes, a lot of it's not relevant, but we've put a lot of money into this, and we hand it off to the council. So the way it stands, as what we understand today, the actual state and federal government created all of this information network to supposedly educate the public, which hasn't happened. You've got organisations that were paid quite a considerable amount of money with very small base, and they then doubled the base by saying, they didn't double it, they doubled it by saying, well, if we're talking to our husband, then they would have a wife, so therefore there's two people. So immediately 1,200 people became 1,500 people, and they collected funding for that for the 1,500 or the 2,500 or 5,000, depending on how they worked their statistics. And they got paid this money, and they didn't educate anybody. They didn't educate anybody outside of that loop, and all they did was send it to the people on their list. That was all they did. And they collected a large sum of this lantana funding. So at what point do we start to go, I'm sick to death of my money being wasted on printing books that nobody reads, that has information that's completely incorrect? We can't afford to keep pouring this money down this toilet and being misinformed. Lantana is 10 million hectares, heading to 35. That's pretty much all we need to know. We're not going to manage this garbage. We need to eradicate it. Just because the scientists and the groups that the government bought and paid them to tell them what they wanted to hear, can't imagine a workforce where we go into communities, we remove the material and we do all the heavy lifting. In that action between those communities, we ask the communities to then take over the process of the rehabilitation. While we're there with the machinery, we help those communities to then get the assets that they need in place the material so they can then get it spread, bringing their children into that process, encouraging and educating the children of what the ecology is for the next future generation. We will have cut costs enormously just by bringing those communities into that, rather than you go into a suburb and if you do the work, you do the work, and then you walk out and no rehabilitation, and the material comes back because it wasn't cleared from the places it had to be cleared from. That's the difference between us as a business and the government. All of the stuff they've written about this, and they haven't even worked out that water is the #1 vehicle for this material. Therefore, when it's in the high terrain, it's pumping huge volumes of seeds and material down into Sanford from the high country. It's not rocket science. So when they did their studies and they said to you, okay, it's terribly hard to clean this material up. It is so hard. It has a 4-year, a 7-year seedbed. It is absolute rubbish. I've removed Lantana from places with 0 comeback. Just it's a standard thing, okay? Because we start at the high point and we clear all that thing. If you have land above you, it's your neighbour's land and they're above you. Whatever you do on your land is going to be negated by those people above you. Now, should you still clear your land? Of course you should. If you clear your land and then you, and I'm not talking about clearing of all vegetation, I'm talking about only the Lantana, and you mow and manage that property, you can, there are people in Sanford, when you drive along the highway and you look at the horrific scenes you can see, and they have Lantana that's 30 feet high and their yard is like a pristine bowling green because they have to. They cannot manage that property any different. On 3 sides they are completely surrounded by the city council, by Moreton Bay Regional Council. Okay? And they are fighting an endless war for however long they've been doing it, because I only just noticed it in recent times. And it's the living proof of what we're trying to get through to people. You're paying this price regardless of whether you want to. What you're going to pay in the future is incredible. The fact that these people, these experts, don't even understand the way the material moves across the terrain. These are the people who came to your farms, to your properties and said, you must clean that up. The councils that came into your properties and said, we're going to sue you if you don't, and then did sue you. In New South Wales, we have people who cleared their land of Lantana and was sued by the council because the council secretly changed the classification on the land and what machinery could be used in it. We have all sorts of environmental terrorism going on from councils and governments not supporting the people. Tell me, you guys have a poll and just go, if you clear your land of Lantana, if you take it seriously and you make the choice to not have a poisonous, noxious material on your land, then why are you not supported to have your neighbours clean it up? Or the council. The council actually is subject to the same laws that you are, but nobody takes them to court and goes, you need to clean this stuff up. You have hundreds of kilometres of it locally here, just locally here, down every watercourse. And they've gone, it's low risk to us now because that's how we view it and that's where we are. Logan City Council says it's not even noxious anymore as far as they're concerned. You've seen the documentation on the Children's Health Queensland Hospital, right, that lists it as having killed people, okay? And I've seen it where it's written that it's children and adults. Not necessarily on that document, but I've seen it in places. You got to remember, the amount of material that I've drawn in, I have enormous amounts of material there that you just can't imagine the volume of it, and the amount of it that's incorrect. You look at it and you go, how is this insanity possible? These people have been sprouting this stuff off to people. It's no wonder people don't take it seriously. Yet the government says, well, we spent an enormous amount of money to educate people, but it never got to the people. We had these closed workshops where 200 people attended, and they're supposed to be my peers. There's no list of who attended those things, right? I mean specific lists. They say, oh yeah, there's 11 councils. Was it 11 councils or was it 11 people from council? Was it the same council or not? These government departments play games with their funding that we pay huge amounts of money for, and it's just statistical manipulation and lies, specifically targeted to us to want us to care, but not care too much that we ask that they clean up their mess. The amount of people contacting us that are consistently and continuously infested from national parks and state forests around their properties, the council lands all around their properties, and we're the bad guys that should clean up our end of this woods. You know, we need to start standing up and going, you know what, this stuff's just not good enough, and we want answers. And stop just continuously allowing these people to tell us dribble, which is completely incorrect, and we just go, 1,000 jobs a day? You're creating 1,000 jobs a day? Where are those jobs at, Mr Turnbull? Whereabouts are those jobs? Because I'd like to have a look at what jobs you say were created. Because every industry across this nation is in terrible state, and you're creating 1,000 jobs a day. Nobody says, where are the 1,000 jobs? Nobody says, name it. Nobody says, where did this come from? Or what are we doing about it? They just accept when they make these, and we pay for this propaganda. We pay for this brainwashing. The NBN, the speeds that people are getting out of the NBN. You can't even keep a phone working on the NBN. Those are the realities of every day my working in those areas and talking to people and elderly people. And for the last 5 years, I've not heard of a person saying, oh yeah, the phone's been great. Every single one of them says 90% of the time I can't keep a proper phone, like keep the phone working. You know, they have been back dozens of times, hundreds of times, and it's still a problem. And if the power on the network goes down, we don't have a communications network. Who would have ever designed that? That would be like in a war situation, the most incredible thing for your enemy. Who would design something like that? Somebody that wants you to be invaded or have these problems? It's insanity. Yet that is the system they put in place. And yet nobody questions it. Nobody holds these departments accountable. Nobody goes and remembers and says, geez, you remember when they put the Redcliffe line in there? The billions of dollars it cost us in the, what's the name, debacle with the software and everything else that failed? They've all walked away from that. They've all moved on. Oh, and we didn't have train drivers trained. These are the people that you trust to be spending your money to deliver these outcomes. We build roads today, and there is no mechanical means that they put in place in the design for maintenance, for the surfaces to be maintained. Can you imagine that insanity? We pay enormous amounts of money to cut grass with incredibly specialist machinery that we should be putting benches in there. Like, this is just the basic building principles. We should be putting benches in there at levels that allow us to maintain those surfaces. Grasses are our greatest friend and asset. We need to sink more water into the grounds, back to our aquifers and our water table, and stop these damaging floods that are all a result of this stupidity of the way they build things. And I've been in the building game since I was 13 years old. You look at these things and go, I could make a fortune as a consultant telling them the most basic thing that in the last, 50 years, they haven't worked out. So they're still building these areas and these roads and these landslide areas, these areas that will be erosion, and they're putting wattle trees on them, and they're putting all these other things on them where they can't then mow them, and those wattles grow to a certain height, and then we've got to go through and pay enormous amounts of money to take them all down, where the grass is then properly putting in proper benches. It's not great technology, it's just simple ideas that you must be planning ahead. Surely somebody drawing the plans out would be going, oh yes, so we'll want to put a 20-foot or a 30-foot wide bench through here, and the machine will reach up above and it'll mow that section there, and it'll reach down below it and it'll mow that section. Jesus, this is revolutionary stuff. It's, so far advanced that nobody has ever worked this stuff out. And that's what we face with the Lantana. The systems and things that they want to put forward as being the mechanical means of dealing with these problems is 30 to 100 years old that they put up. The machinery that they're showing is 30 to 50 years old. And they say that's the system that's used. Well, that is the system they use. Okay, because when they did their studies, they went and got that old technology and those old ways of doing things, and they said to them, okay, you show us this, because then we can say to the general public and everybody else, you can't use those systems on those terrains. Of course you shouldn't. You shouldn't have been using it 30 years ago, but it was what you had. Then why aren't we up to date with our studies? Because they're just spending huge amounts of money to rework old material and then pass it off to you as worthwhile. You know, everybody's coming out of the door and turning right and doing exactly the same thing. We're the only ones that turned left and went, well, you can't do it like that. You have to do it ethically. You have to have a proper ethos to deliver an outcome that has the lowest footprint you can deliver, and it's specifically targeted to the specific things that you need to have removed. And then the rehabilitation and the regeneration and the erosion control measures are negligible. They're tiny because you didn't destroy the outcome. You use the poisons, you still got to go back and remove the material. What did it succeed in? It's ridiculous. It's hugely expensive, and it damages the ecology like you wouldn't believe. The subsoil life is absolutely decimated. And these programs that they put in place through national parks and all of these volunteer programs, this bush regenerate, they all are based on that system. So the only things they can use are poisons, and the fire. And fire is incredibly damaging to the environment. It's incredibly damaging to the ecosystem. The amount of plants that actually do benefit from the fire regime are negligible. And when you actually get down to the nitty-gritty and dig through the information, you end up finding that they're well and truly aware of how many detrimental attributes to that ecology come from that. The weed infestation after fire is high. Lantana's back there before anybody else, and then it is stronger, and the ecology is weaker. Hello? And that happened because the government departments spent no money on those assets to protect them. And we just keep going around and around in this endless thing of spending this money with no outcomes. Because the people in charge do not like me. They do not like what I'm saying because it's revolutionary, because it actually shows them up for the environmental terrorism that goes on through these areas, and the cost to the lives of those people who have been infected and infested with these diseases because of this ecology and these things. They don't want this information to get out to people, and for people to go, you know what, my property is going to cost me $10,000, $100,000 to clear this material off it, and I get no support from the government at all, and I don't believe that's necessarily correct, and I get no support from any of my neighbours, because my neighbours are actually Energex, South East Queensland Water, Council, you know, national parks, state forests. These are all the people infesting me, and they won't do anything about it, and lots of private individuals won't do anything about it. You know, unfortunately, this is a national biosecurity disaster that we need to change laws and we need to change policies to end up protecting the masses, the people doing the right thing and saying this is important to have poisonous, toxic material removed from my property. And if you start the garbage of saying, well, we're frightened because a worse weed may take its place. Well, if you're removing that weed, you better make sure that the other ones don't get in there. It's simple management practice. And that, you know, I understand that argument, because look at their success now. Look at the increases from 6 million saying to 10 million and going to 35 million, and look at their success, and look at the lies and the misinformation put out. We can't afford to keep paying into this. Politicians need to go, we either take this bull by the horns and we create the proper workforce and the proper ecological platforms with the mechanical removal, because it's the only thing that can remove the volumes. There is no other mechanism that even comes close to this. We have to be removing millions of cubic meters of this material per year. That's a whole industry. paying taxes, buying fuel, buying machinery, creating the ecosystems that we need to regenerate and rebuild. It's worth having the investment in. And it's no less important than roads, medical, electricity, water, sewage. It's no less important. It's a national security issue and must be dealt with. So please share these things locally, all through your networks across Australia, all the way, because all of us have a actual cost in this. We are all going to pay this price. It's not just whether you own a block of land or you own a unit. You're going to pay this price. And how much more money do you want to pay for this mismanagement before you finally say, enough's enough, I'm not putting up with this anymore? I want proper affirmative action. I want these workforces trained and created, and I want the actual measured results to be able to say, well, okay, we took out 1 million cubic meters of this material, our growth rate is this, and this is the target we must reach by this time frame. We can't sit on a fence anymore just letting these costs go up, because exponentially these costs become so much more significant every day, every month, every year that they are allowed to mismanage our lives. There's nothing they've done on any level. There is no weed, not one weed, that they've been successful with. The Singapore daisy, the list goes on, rat's tail. It just goes on and on and on and on. Cat's claw. It does not stop at any level every time you drive around. We have to stop just pretending these guys are doing any job, and we need to take charge of it, because we can't afford to be wasting money like these councils cost us a fortune, and the corruption is unbelievable, and nothing gets done. We're in a worse position every single year. So please share all the information out there. Please comment and like the information. Please be involved. If I put an angry face on often your comments, the angry face isn't anything to do with you. It's to do with the topic, to say that these people make me angry. The councils make me angry. The way that they are treating us and lying to us is just completely inappropriate. Poisonous, toxic material growing on your footpath. Your children can't even walk on the footpath. Why have we gotten to the stage that we allowed this? I know, because the councils lied to us and said, you know what, significantly as people, you're not important. We just want the rates off you. We just want to fine you, badger you with permits, but we actually don't want to supply any real works. Mount Mead, Diagula, Woodford, all the way out through Karoi, Somerset, back through Mount Glorious, down through Sanford, all the way back through here. And that's just in that little area. All the way across our country, we have huge areas written off by councils. We should be demanding that they actually inform us before we purchase a property in their shire where they stand on these issues. Hold on a minute, that's called an election. You need to start being very specific about these people. Let's let these elections be the first time in recent history that we actually have something specific to vote on. That we specifically say these local issues are important. The national interest issues are important. And nobody is talking about doing any of this. We are going to go to Canberra and we are going to push this and lobby this to the hilt. We are going to change these laws and policies, I can tell you now. Or we're going to change political parties. Political parties are going to go by the wayside because they have no ecological, Turnbull, Anastasia Palaszczuk, the New South Wales government. None of them have got back to me about this material. None of them have bothered to come and have a look at exactly what has changed in the dynamics of these things that is the catastrophe. Not one of them has taken the interest. Senator Hanson's the first one that stood there now and had a proper in-depth discussion with me, and the intelligence and the amount of information in that stuff is incredible. I look forward to talking to Lloyd Russell. I look forward to talking to more and more people to be able to get to the bottom of this and for us to change this. They need to start caring, and we need to start making them care. because it's costing us. It's it's our children's future that is in danger here. Our being able to feed our country is what is on the table here. Anyway, look, thank you very much. I know these things get long-winded, but I can't help being passionate about what 10 million hectares. Can you imagine 10 million hectares? Can you imagine how many animals have been ostracized from that area? And they say some little bug, little animal, little this might live in those areas. Not does, not by name, but might. But when you actually go into those areas, as I do, and they're complete infestations, we're not talking about an odd bush here or there where an animal trespasses through the middle there and drops some droppings and they go, oh well, see, they're living in this area. I'm talking about proper infestations. Acres, kilometres. Nothing gets through these infestations. I've shown some of the footage there. You look at that aerial footage of the drone, that's what it's about. And nothing has traversed through that material. And at ground level, when you take the photograph there, you could not put your finger. You couldn't put your finger more than that far into the material before it can't go any further. And they say something might live in there. Absolute rubbish. It's lies. It is misinformation. It is dishonest. But the bigger, the stronger those infestations get, the less our animals, our fauna and our flora can enjoy this environment, or our fauna can get through this environment to even get water, let alone anything else. They're going to go for miles. Have you ever seen a koala on the ground? That is not pretty. It is hugely dangerous to that animal. How do they get around these infestations? Huge assets. Anastasia Palaszczuk, so environmentally friendly with her clearing laws, has never made any attempt to have a look at what has changed. If they had an ecological backbone in any shape or form, they'd have made that connection. They'd have said, so why is this different? So why is our government departments that have written all these books wrong? No, not 1 ounce of any part of these things. We need to take the Weeds Council and shake them up and go, you know what? You got us to here. So why would we trust anything? Complete failure. This is the complete failure. Every dollar that was poured down those, I don't want to get too nasty, but down those funnels is a complete waste of money. Look at where we are today. It's ever increasing. They've never even, they completely say that we can't get to the point of eradicating this material. If you look at their charts, eradication makes up that much, containment and what's the name makes up that much, and talking about it and everything else makes up that much. Excuse me? Eradication should have been that much. And then containment wouldn't be such a big issue. They are going to get us to 35 million or more under their abilities and the way they handle this. You can be sure of that. And what the cost of that is going to be, I just can't imagine what it will be. But I'm not going to let it get to that. They won't get past this. I will keep going. I will keep getting this information out there, and I will keep demanding answers from them to show and highlight exactly how bad this is for us as a country, how much of a national disaster and catastrophe this is, and how much it's going to cost us to clean this mess up. We will meet critical mass. We will meet the expansion of this material. We must meet it for our children. Otherwise the costs are going to be unthinkable, and on every level of our ecology. It is linked to the greenhouse and the carbon emissions. The whole thing is so linked. We need to take action. Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm Gary, Lantana Removal Queensland. This is our business, not just our passion. This is what we do. We remove lantana and we make it stick. Okay, others don't. They can't do it. They don't understand anything about the material. The government doesn't understand anything about the material. This whole guff of this environmental stuff is nothing less than environmental terrorism that they've inflicted on us. You know, their greatest managed areas have the greatest amount of material coming out of them, and they are going to ban us from being in those areas very, very shortly to cover up the level of those infestations. You know, take your happy snaps, guys. Put them on the thing. Help me to get this Lantana Removal Queensland group up and running. Join that group so you can share those things. Let's get more of these snaps around the places so we actually see these things physically all across the country. We need more across the country, north and south and west and east and all over. We need it. Thank you very much. I'm Gary. Bye-bye.